The blue hour gathered gently around the hill, softening every edge of grass and timber. Liora climbed the quiet stairs inside the weathered windmill, one hand sliding along the worn rail. Each step answered with a low wooden murmur, nothing more than the old boards settling under her careful weight. The air smelled of grain and evening coolness, and the last pale light of day slipped through the small high windows in thin, calm bands. At the landing she paused and trimmed the soft lantern. The wick settled into a steady glow that warmed the flower-dusted walls without hurry. Motes drifted in the mild air like slow snow that never quite fell. She held her palms to the worn wood of the beam beside her until the day's remaining chill left her fingers. Then she crossed to the sail gear and eased the great wooden arms into the mild breeze that had begun to lean against the hill. The sails answered with a patient turn. Soon the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning filled the chamber like a quiet conversation that needed no words. Liora listened a moment, measuring the pace of the wind by that familiar sound alone. She moved to the grain measures next, scooping and leveling with the same unhurried care she gave every dusk. Golden dust rose and settled again on her notebook and on the cuff of her sleeve. When the measures stood ready, she opened the flower-dusted notebook on the ledge by the lantern. Between the neat columns of notes she left empty spaces, because certain quiet directions of wind always brought something else. Tonight the breeze from the farther valleys carried faint unfinished melodies, thin as threads and almost too soft to name. They arrived only from those angles, never from the open sky or the near fields, and they never stayed long enough to finish themselves. Liora tilted her head and listened. One phrase lifted, then faded before its last note could find a resting place. Another rose like a question that forgot to wait for an answer. She dipped her pencil and began to sketch their shapes between the flower notes, small curves and broken lines that tried to hold what the air had offered. The pencil made almost no sound against the paper. Only the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning kept company with her work. She wondered, not with worry but with quiet curiosity, why the half-songs chose those particular paths of wind. She wondered what one might sound like if it ever arrived whole, finished and calm, the way a full loaf rests after baking. The thought did not press her. It simply sat beside her the way the lantern light sat on the open page. Outside, the valleys below the hill held their evening hush. Inside, the sails continued their slow circle, gathering whatever the mild breeze cared to bring. Liora measured one more scoop of grain, brushed the dust from her fingers, and returned to the notebook. A few more lines found their way onto the page, unfinished like the melodies themselves, waiting without impatience. When the last of the faint phrases drifted away, she closed nothing. She left the notebook open on the ledge and drew the small stool nearer the open gallery. The lantern glow rested across the pages and across her quiet hands. Beyond the wooden frame the blue hour deepened into a softer blue, and the grass on the gentle rise barely stirred. She sat with the open notebook and lantern glow while the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning kept time with the hush of the valleys. The sound rose and fell in the same patient rhythm it had kept for many dusks before this one. Liora breathed with it, palms warm again, eyes half lowered, letting the unfinished melodies settle into the quiet spaces of her evening the way flour settles into the seams of a well-used notebook. Nothing more was needed. The sails turned, the light held, and the hill kept its gentle watch until sleep could find its own slow way up the stairs. On a later dusk the blue hour returned with the same mild patience. Liora climbed the timber stairs once more and found the mill waiting in its familiar hush. The air smelled faintly of grain and warm wood. She trimmed the lantern wick until the glow settled soft and even across the gallery floor. She warmed her palms on the worn rail and listened to the breeze. It came from a quarter she had seldom used, gentler than the usual valley winds and carrying a cool sweetness from distant grass. With quiet care she eased the sails toward that milder direction. The cloth caught and began to turn. For a little while only the familiar half-shaped notes drifted past, soft as flower motes in lantern light. Then something fuller arrived. A whole musical phrase rode cleanly on the breeze, complete from its first low note to its gentle close. It was simple and round, like a song someone might hum while measuring meal by a kitchen window. Liora felt it settle fully in her hearing. She stood still and let the phrase pass through her once more. Under her breath she hummed it back, matching its slow rise and fall. The sound felt easy in her throat, unfinished, nothing about it. When it faded she hummed it again to keep the shape warm in her mind. The sails kept their slow circle. She turned from the open gallery and began a quiet check of the stair rail, the way she sometimes did when the wind brought unexpected things. Near the third step her fingers met a small square of cloth resting against the wood. It was no larger than a coin and light as a dried petal. She lifted it into the lantern glow. Tiny stitches formed a simple pattern of leaves and grain heads, the same careful embroidery that once ran along the pocket edge of her mother's old apron. The thread was faded to a soft blue-gray, and one corner held a single loose end that had never been snipped away. The cloth smelled faintly of clean linen and long storage. Liora turned the token once between her fingers. She carried it to the ledge where her flour-dusted notebook still lay open from the evening before. Between 2 pages of grain measures and half-sketched melodies, she tucked the little cloth square so that only its embroidered edge showed. Her palm rested over it for a moment, feeling the slight raised threads through the paper. She returned to the stool by the open gallery and sat again. The milder wind from the seldom used quarter softened further. The whole phrase she had caught still moved quietly through her thoughts, full enough to hum whenever she wished. Outside, the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning marked the slowing of the breeze until the cloth hung almost still. Liora kept one hand on the closed notebook, the token warm beneath her palm. The lantern glow reached across her quiet lap and out toward the deepening blue. She did not yet know how the embroidered square had found the stair rail, or which gentle hand might have set it there for the wind to carry. That small mystery rested unanswered beside the complete phrase still echoing softly in her mind. She breathed with the last slow turns of the sails. The hill held its calm watch. Nothing pressed her to rise or write or wander further. The phrase lingered like a friendly guest who needed no reply, and the token stayed safe under her hand while the blue hour grew softer and the mill settled into its oldest quiet. When the next blue hour gathered its soft color over the hill, Liora rose from the bench and slipped the notebook into the deep pocket of her apron. The embroidered token rested between the pages like a quiet promise. She crossed the worn floorboards and opened the low outer door that led onto the narrow gallery. The boards beneath her bare feet felt smooth and cool from the evening air. Beyond the thin wooden rail the grassy rise fell away in gentle folds, and farther still the neighboring valleys lay in soft blue shadow. A mild breeze moved across her cheeks and stirred the loose strands of hair at her temples. Flower dust motes drifted in the lantern light that spilled from the doorway behind her. She stood still and listened. The complete phrase she had gathered the evening before returned to her mind as easily as breath. She hummed it once, low and steady, and turned her face toward each quiet quarter of the wind. The melody seemed to lean most clearly from the southeast, where a long gentle slope ran down between two rounded ridges. There the grass looked silver blue in the last light, and a thin ribbon of path disappeared into the folds. Liora drew out her notebook and rested it on the wide rail. Between the flower notes she sketched the soft curve of that distant slope, the two ridges, and the way the path slipped from view. Her pencil moved slowly. The paper took the lines without hurry. When the sketch felt true enough, she closed the book again and tucked it away. The breeze strengthened by a little. She stepped along the gallery toward the nearest sail arm and reached out to ease the canvas into a better catch. Her fingers found the familiar rough weave, warm from the day and still holding the scent of sun and grain. As she smoothed a fold, she felt a place where the seam had loosened. Thread ends brushed her skin like tiny frayed whispers. She pressed the gap gently closed and listened. A faint half-melody rode the air for a moment, then frayed into silence as the canvas eased open again under its own weight. The song did not break sharply. It simply thinned and wandered away, the way flour drifts when a sack is lifted too quickly. Liora tested the seam once more. Each time the cloth gaped, the quiet notes scattered before they could settle into the sail's patient catch. She reached into her apron for the small stick of soft chalk she kept for marking grain measures. With careful strokes she left a pale fleck along the loose seam, just enough to find again in kinder light. The chalk dust felt dry and fine against her fingertips. She smoothed the canvas one last time and stepped back. From the open gallery she watched the sails turn. The soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning reached her unevenly now, a little longer on one pass, a little shorter on the next, as if the cloth itself were pausing to breathe through the gap. The sound was still gentle. It simply no longer kept the old even measure. Liora lingered a while longer, palms resting on the rail, eyes resting on the southeast slope she had drawn. The blue hour deepened around the mill. Warm breeze carried the mild scent of cut grass and distant earth. Nothing hurried her. When the air grew cooler against her arms she turned and stepped back through the low doorway into the lantern glow. Inside, the air held its familiar quiet warmth. She set the notebook on the shelf and sat on the inner bench beneath the small window. Chalk still dusted her fingertips, pale against the flour that always lived in the lines of her skin. She turned her hands slowly in the soft light and felt the dry powder there. Outside, the sails kept their uneven rhythm. She knew the seam must be mended before the next blue hour could gather its songs cleanly again. Yet she was not yet sure which soft thread would hold the melodies best, or how tightly the stitch should rest against the breeze. The question settled beside her without weight. She breathed with the mill's old wood and let the chalk remain on her fingers while the lantern burned mild and steady. She sat a little longer with the chalk pale on her fingertips and the mild lantern light resting across her knees. The question of thread had no hurry in it. After a while she rose and crossed to the small wooden chest where she kept her mending things, the lid worn smooth by many quiet evenings. Inside lay spools of soft cotton and linen in gentle grays and creams. She lifted them one by one and held each strand against a scrap of old sailcloth she kept for matching. One thread felt right beneath her thumb, fine enough to flex with the breeze, strong enough to close the gap without pulling the canvas tight. She chose that spool and a slender needle, then tucked both into the pocket of her apron. The notebook waited on the shelf. She left it there for now and stepped once more through the low doorway onto the narrow gallery. Blue hour still held the hill in its calm wash of color. The mild breeze moved past her cheeks without haste, as if it too were waiting. Flower dust motes drifted in the lantern glow that spilled from the open doorway, turning slowly in the air like tiny quiet stars. She reached the sail she had marked earlier. The chalk fleck showed pale against the weathered cloth. Beneath her fingers the loose seam opened just enough for the wind to slip through and fray the sound. She threaded the needle by feel and by the soft lantern light, then began. Her first pull was slow and even. The soft thread settled into the canvas as if it had always belonged there. She worked from the bottom of the gap upward, drawing each stitch closed with a gentle patience. The mild breeze waited kindly against the cloth, neither tugging nor pressing. It only moved enough to keep the air sweet with the scent of dry grass and warm timber. Stitch by stitch the gap grew smaller. She paused now and then to smooth the canvas with her palm, feeling how the surface grew whole again. The flower that lived in the lines of her skin dusted the cloth lightly, and the chalk fleck faded under her careful work. Outside the hill remained quiet. Somewhere far below a valley held its own blue dusk, and the sky deepened without sound. As the seam drew nearer to closed, something changed in the air that brushed her face. A thin ribbon of melody arrived, unfinished still, yet clearer than before. It rode the waiting breeze in a soft curve of sound, then faded. Another followed after a few heartbeats, a little stronger, as if the canvas had begun to catch what it once let slip away. She kept stitching. Her shoulders stayed loose. Her breath matched the slow rhythm of her hands. When the last of the gap came together, she made 2 quiet knots and snipped the spare thread with small scissors she had brought from the chest. The sail felt even under her palm now, whole and ready. She eased the wooden gear a fraction so the mended sail could take the mild breeze more fully. The soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning settled back into its familiar even pace, no longer uneven, no longer hurried. The sound wrapped the gallery like a low, steady breath. Clearer ribbons of unfinished melody began to arrive from the quarter she had marked. They did not finish themselves. They simply rested more cleanly in the air, shapes of sound she could almost hold. She listened for a long mild stretch of time, then stepped back inside. The lantern still burned steady. She took the notebook from the shelf and sat again on the inner bench. With a soft pencil she sketched the new clearer shapes between her flower notes, letting the lines curve the way the sounds had curved. As she turned a page, she noticed how several of those sketched phrases already sat near her quiet jottings about grain blends, the ones she mixed for soft loaves, the ones that favored certain valleys' wheat. The pencil marks lived side by side on the paper, close as neighbors, though she did not yet understand why. She closed the notebook gently and set it aside. Then she rose and went once more to the doorway, resting both palms on the warm wood of the frame. Outside the sails kept their even pace. The songs came clearer now, ribbons of half-finished sound riding the waiting breeze. Their true asking remained gently unanswered, and that was all right. She stood with the warm wood under her palms and let the mill hold her in its calm while blue hour deepened and the lantern light stayed mild. She stayed a little longer at the doorway, palms still resting on the warm wood, and listened as the clearer ribbons of sound gathered themselves. The mild breeze carried them more fully now that the seam held true. What had been only shape and curve began to settle into something almost spoken, soft as breath against grain. Liora turned back inside and took up the lantern, holding it near enough that the flower dust motes drifted slow and gold in its mild circle. She opened the notebook again on the worn ledge beside the measure. The pages smelled faintly of wheat and old linen. She turned them with care, one after another, while outside the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning kept its even pace. The melodies came in quiet phrases now, no longer half-lost. She hummed under her breath to match them and found the sounds naming things she already knew. A blend with more of the pale valley wheat for a loaf that stayed soft overnight. A measure that favored the darker grain from the lower fields, the kind that held its warmth longer when shared. Another that asked for a little of the fine sift she kept for feast days. Each phrase arrived like a gentle request carried over the hills, spoken without hurry by people preparing a harvest loaf together. She turned another page. There, beside a sketched ribbon of notes from many dusks past, sat her own quiet jotting in the same soft pencil. The pale wheat mix, the resting time, the water drawn cool. On the next leaf the darker blend waited already half-written, the proportions marked in her careful hand from weeks ago. Farther on, the fine sift appeared beside a melody she had caught early in the season, the lines of music and the lines of grain living side by side as if they had always meant to meet. Her hands had been answering all the while. She had measured and mixed and noted without naming the question, only following the small pull of care that lived in her work. The unfinished songs had never been riddles. They had been invitations, and the notebook had been composing its replies in flower and patience long before she understood. She reached for the tiny embroidered cloth token tucked between the leaves. Its pattern matched the faded stitches on her mother's old apron, the one that still hung near the lower door. Holding the token in her palm, she felt the quiet welcome across the distance, a thread of belonging that needed no voice. The valleys had been speaking in the language she already kept. The sails had only helped the words arrive. Outside, the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning sounded almost like agreement, steady and kind. She traced one matching pair of pages with a fingertip, melody and mix resting close as neighbors. The pencil marks no longer sat in mystery. Wonder settled into something simpler, a calm understanding that warmed her the way the lantern warmed the wood. She did not close the book. She left it open to those pages and rested both hands lightly on the paper, feeling the faint grit of flour that always lived in the grain of the notebook. The blue hour held steady around the mill. The breeze remained mild. The songs, now known, drifted softer still, content to be heard. Tomorrow she would grind what was asked and set the sacks ready. Tonight she needed only this quiet knowing. She sat with the open notebook before her, the matching lines of song and recipe side by side, and let the understanding rest fully in her. The gentle work of grinding and giving waited without urgency, and she was ready for it when morning came. When the next blue hour gathered soft and even around the rise, Liora rose from her chair with the quiet readiness she had carried through the day. The notebook still lay open on the table, its pages holding the matched lines of song and mix. She touched the embroidered token once more, then turned to the grain bins and the worn wooden hopper. She measured each blend by the marks her own hand had already set down. The first scoop of pale grain whispered as it fell. She eased the stones into their slow, patient grind and felt the mill answer with a deep, round murmur underfoot. Warm flour dust rose in thin drifting ribbons through the lantern light. It smelled of sun-dried fields and clean cloth. She waited through each unhurried turn, palm resting lightly on the timber housing, until the first sack began to fill with the fine soft meal the valleys had asked for. A second blend followed, then a third. She worked without hurry, pausing now and then to brush the pale dust from her wrists and to listen. Outside, the soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning kept its gentle pace, steady as breath. The unfinished melodies of earlier evenings had settled into quiet shapes of thanks that needed no new notes. She only ground what the pages already knew. When the meal cooled, she gathered small cloth sacks from the low shelf. Each one she filled with care, tucking the open mouth closed and binding it with a length of soft twine. Her fingers knew the simple knot from many seasons. She tied them firm yet kind, so the sacks would open easily for whoever came. 3 neat bundles rested on the floor beside her boots, pale against the dark wood, each dusted faintly with the flour that always stayed near her work. She lifted them one by one. The weight settled evenly against her arms, warm still from the stones. She stepped out onto the gallery and began the slow walk down the gentle grassy rise. The grass bent softly under her steps. A mild breeze moved across the slope and carried the faint scent of evening earth. Below, the hill foot waited in the last blue light, a quiet place where the paths from the neighboring valleys met and parted again. She set the sacks there side by side on a flat stone that had always served this purpose. She smoothed each cloth once with her palm so they would look ready and welcome. No one needed to climb the mill stairs. Early walkers would find what had been asked for, waiting without fuss. She stood a moment longer, feeling the cool air on her face and the settled quiet of work finished well. Then she turned and climbed the rise once more. Her steps grew slower with each easy rise of the path. Inside the mill the lantern still glowed mild and gold. She eased the sails a final careful fraction so they caught only the kindest part of the breeze. The soft rhythmic creak of the wooden sails turning answered her, even and low, like an old friend keeping time. She returned to the table and closed the notebook at last. The pages settled together with a soft hush. She set the embroidered token between them so it would rest near the matched lines of song and recipe. With quiet fingers she trimmed the lantern wick until the light grew small and gentle. Flower dust motes drifted slower in the fading glow, then thinned into the blue that filled the room. Liora stood a little longer in that dim calm, hands resting empty now, shoulders soft. Everything that had been half-sung was answered. Everything that had been asked was offered. The valleys felt patiently linked across the quiet distance, held by grain and wind and the simple care of sacks left ready at the hill foot. Her own steps had grown slow and ready for rest. She sat once more in the familiar chair, back against the worn wood, and let the deepest calm of the blue hour gather fully around her. Above the quiet hill the sails kept their kind soft creak, turning on into the night without need or haste. Everything answered and offered, she settles into the deepest calm of the blue hour while the sails keep their kind soft creak into sleep.